back to Inside the Studio series. I'm Joanne Pollock with Remarque Art Consulting, and I'm here this morning with Roslyn Levin, a Dragonfly studio artist in Orangeville at Dragonfly Arts. So thank you, Roslyn, for agreeing to meet with me this morning and talk about your incredibly interesting technique that you use, and that is Sumi-e art form. So of course everybody needs to know what Sumi-e is.
Well, Sumi-e means black ink picture, and it's a Japanese art form, which can also be called Oriental brushstroke painting. It's essentially the same art form as in China, Korea, Thailand, Vietnam. All those areas learn the same art form as Buddhism spread across the Orient, because the Buddhist monks would use it for their meditation practices. And every country changed it to match their culture.
Interesting. So this is Japanese specifically?
Yes, I learned from a Japanese teacher, and what may be considered different about the Japanese art form is it's supposed to be at least 70% black ink, and there is a lot of white space, which you can see in my paintings. White space is called yohaku, or the void in Japanese.
And what is the purpose of the white space?
It's part of the balance, part of the composition of the piece, and to allow the energy of the universe to come in so you can breathe.
It is predominantly done in always black and various shades of black?
Yes, but there are different kinds of black ink. The black ink usually is a black, brown black, or blue black.
Wow.
And I like to use a blue black ink. You wouldn't know it's a blue black unless you had it next to one that was of a different shade of ink.
Interesting. So there is quite a meditative art form attached to this. So it's not just that you're thinking that you are going to do a cat this morning. Maybe you are, I'm not sure. Can you talk about the meditative aspect of the process?
Yes. Well, it's meditative right from the beginning. To make the ink, you take the ink stick, which I'll be describing later, and you grind the ink on what's called a suzuri, and that practice itself is meditative. Then the art form itself, you're not painting a cat, which the example that you use in my favorite subject. You become a cat. You have to feel what that feels like. You have to feel what that animal, bird, person, plant is like. If it's a plant, if it's a tree, it's strong. If the bark is rough, you have to feel that inside. And you breathe and move with the brush. And that puts your spirit right into your painting.
So the painting actually becomes alive. And I'm sure that there are very well recognized various artists in Japan and now in Canada, all over the world probably, that are able to capture that essence of aliveness, because it seems to me that that specifically is very important in your form of art.
Indeed, yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So you started learning Sumi-e in 1976.
That's correct.
And in 2009 you began to study Japanese calligraphy.
That's correct.
So that's a long time to be practicing this art form. And of course the obvious question is, how did you get into this in the first place?
Well, I had not painted in several years for various reasons, and I was working for the federal government in Ottawa, and I wanted to get back into art because from when I was a very small child, I wanted to be an artist, a professional artist. So I went to the Ottawa School of Art and I started taking just about everything they had, and I had done oil paintings, acrylics. At that time, I learned acrylics when I first started painting. Pen and ink, pastels, colored pencils, all of it. And so I started taking various classes, and the night I took the watercolor class, Sumi-e was being taught across the hall. And I thought to myself, if I take that class, I'll get better strength in my brushstrokes. It'll improve my watercolor work. So I signed up for one class, bought really cheap supplies, And the first class, I thought, oh, well, this is what I want to do. And I dropped the watercolors and just did the Sumi-e. And, excuse me. And after that, every once in a while I'd say, geez, Roslyn, you're painting in black and white. Everyone uses color. So I'd go and I'd try another kind of art form and do several things and be very successful. But the Sumi-e always drew me back until I finally gave in and said, okay, Lord, I am a Sumi-e artist.
And we're glad you are. I know you've had some very influential masters. Are they called masters?
They're masters or sensei.
Sensei. And you've had some very influential people in that regard. Can you tell us who they are or what that experience was like working with those people?
Well, my first teacher in Ottawa was Tomoko Kodama, and she was amazing. She didn't speak English very well, but that didn't matter. She could show us what she wanted. And she developed a technique called the body breath brush method, where you are one with your brush, where you move and breathe with your brush. And she tested her method on school children. She took it to Japan, where she was given an award for her innovation in Sumi-e. And then she was also given an award by the Ottawa School of Art for her years of teaching there. And sadly, she passed away in, I believe it was 2011. And so I lost a good friend as well as a teacher at that point. But I had spent years looking for someone to take me further than I had been able to go with Tomoko. And it wasn't until I encountered Noriko Maeda, who teaches Shodo, or Japanese calligraphy, out of her home in Kitchener-Waterloo, as well as in Toronto and Hamilton, and at the Japanese Canadian Cultural Centre in Toronto, that I found someone who could take me further, who could emphasize different things in the brush strokes than what I had learned with Tomoko. And she also taught me how to carve my own hanko, or name stamps, which I've carved about 40 now.
Wow.
Yeah, they're the spot of red that you'll see on all the paintings. They are my signature stamp. And they have different meanings in Japanese, from my artist name, which is spring water, to various words that are meaningful for me for how I paint, for what I paint.
Wow. You've obviously been to Japan.
Not at all, but my paintings went, and they had a lovely time, I have to tell you.
Well, perhaps you're going to get there.
Maybe. I'm in my 70s now, so maybe not this lifetime, but I'm willing to wait till the next lifetime if that's what I have to do.
Good for you. Can we pause for a moment and talk about some of the interesting tools that you use, Roslyn?
Yes.
Can you share with us, because they're fascinating?
Yes.
We're back with Roslyn Levin in her Dragonfly studio space in Orangeville. And we're looking at some pretty amazing and interesting tools, Roslyn, that goes along with your Sumi-e craft. So can you please explain to us what we're looking at here?
Certainly can. So first of all, the ink. The ink is central to what I do. And this ink stick is actually about 15 years old. It used to fill this box. And so you can see I use it. It's my primary ink.
Wow.
It is a blue-black ink made from a particular pine in Japan that gives that delicious shade. These are also Sumi inks that also give a blue-black, and you can see the shades that you get on this little sheet of paper. With the nicer inks, you get a sheet that says, this is what colors you're going to paint in now. And they also have the most spectacular scent. They have essential oils in them, so if you'd like to smell.
Lovely.
Isn't it beautiful? The scent itself becomes more pronounced when I mix the ink, which I do right here. This is called a Suzuri. It can be made of various materials. This one is out of rock, and they don't have to have a well for water, but the Japanese ones usually do. So I put plain water in there, and then I grind the ink. And this is a wonderful time in the art of Sumi-e because you haven't made a mistake. and you can just dream about what you're going to paint. And it is the beginning of the meditation of painting in this art form. So here I've made some ink, dry off the ink sticks. So that is the ink stick and the ink stone or scissori. Then the other things we have are the fude or brush and washi or handmade paper. So the fude are made with an inner core of short hair. And as you get to the outside, the hairs get longer and longer so that you can use this brush both for wide swaths of ink, if you use the side of the brush, or for little details, because every Sumi-e brush should come to a point for detailed work. And if you don't think about it, if you look at this one is, should tell you, this one is made of wolf hair or weasel. Sometimes they call it wolf, but it's really a weasel.
Wow.
This one is from horse hair, and it's a wild mountain horse hair. It's very coarse and stiff. And you can see it doesn't look like it had ever come to a point. But if, as you do when you begin and when you end a session, if I dip and squeeze, this is just water, and your brush should always be clean, then you can see how it can come to a fine point.
Beautiful.
For use.
So different brushes produce different techniques, is that the idea?
Different brushes will act differently. This brush, the horsehair brush, is particularly stiff, so it doesn't bend. This is one that I made from goat hair. It doesn't bend and then hold its shape like this, so you have to be continually reshaping it on the side of your scissori. Then there's goat hair is a particular one. This one happens to be goat hair with wolf hair in the center, which is quite interesting. You can see the tip is just a little bit kind of brownish because of the wolf hair showing through.
And are these brushes purchased in Ontario, or where are you purchasing the brushes?
Some of my brushes I get in Ontario, and some of them I send away to Japan for. The ones that I get in Ontario are usually made in China. This one I sent away to Japan for, along with several others. This one is made from cat hair, and it's quite a lovely brush. I don't use it very often because in the Japanese art form, you start with a brush, you end with that brush. But I have a problem in my aging process. My hands shake. So sometimes if I'm, for example, doing whiskers on a cat, I might use this brush, so that when my hand shakes, I'm not pushing down too hard on the brush, which will make a much wider brush stroke.
And have you had these brushes for a long time?
Oh gosh, yes, some of them for a long time. This one actually, I haven't even used yet. I'm quite excited to use it this week. And some of them I have made myself. These ones, there's one here, this one as well. These ones are all made by me. I make them from feathers. This is a peacock feather, or several peacock feathers. This is guinea hen feathers.
Yes.
This is also peacock. This is from the wings. And these are feathers that people have given me, or I've gotten from a store where you get supplies to tie fishing lures. This is squirrel. You can guess where I got the squirrel hair.
I think I can.
These are goat. I used to be, I have an organic goat dairy, and my former partner and I milk the goats, make goat cheese, goat milk, goat ice cream, etc. And we had some goat skins from goats that were slaughtered, so I took some of them and I used them to make brushes. And this brush is quite interesting. You can see the handle is part barked and part not barked. And this handle was found for me by the husband of a good friend of mine who fishes. And he found this. He said a beaver had taken the bark off half of the branch.
Oh my gosh.
And they gave it to me to make a brush. And it's quite interesting, if I can do this with my hand not shaking too much, that is a balance point, which I didn't realize when I made the brush. I made it so that it would balance like that.
Wow.
You know, innate intelligence, what can I tell you? Now the brushes that I make, or painting with feathers, or I've made brushes from corn brooms, they are very unpredictable. I use them primarily for calligraphy, where I can be quite free, but I've also used them for paintings. For example, there is a painting of a moose that is behind you, low down, and that was painted with a brush that I made, with a brush that I made from skunk hair. I don't know if the skunk minds being a moose. It is. And I have over to the side here a painting of a cat that I did with a brush that I made recently, partially from black bear hair and partially from squirrel. Wow. And the painting above it was done with a brush that I made from the beard from a turkey that one of my clients sent to me. She had a pet turkey who passed away. And then I used another brush with handmade that I'd made myself. I believe it was squirrel hair, and I went through it again because the turkey brush wouldn't pick up the ink very well. So you can see there's little dots and dashes. That's what the turkey did. And I thought the cat looked kind of drunk, so I called it Too Much Catnip, and the stamp on it says cloud because his head's just full of clouds right now.
Let's talk about the stamp, Roslyn.
Certainly. So the stamps are carved out of rock. There are specific places in China and Japan where they harvest these rocks, and you can buy the rocks in various shapes and sizes. These two I carved recently. This one says wild, and you can see this is what it looks like when it is stamped. And this one is one of the smaller ones that I did for usually my smaller pieces. It says heart, mind, spirit, and that's what it looks like when it is stamped.
Do you speak Japanese, Roslyn?
No, I have taken lessons, but I cannot say that I speak Japanese. I often end up teaching my Japanese teacher English, and we've become good friends.
I'm sure.
If we want to just chat, English is going to work.
English it is. And what is this?
So here is the red that you used for stamping. It is a very deep red, the Japanese one, which is called a biri. The Chinese one usually is an orangier red. I prefer the dark red because I like the contrast to the black. And this, I really don't know the name of what this is, but I made it myself, just like the Japanese ones. There is leather. In Japan, it would be deer hide, but I only had a cow, so mine's cowhide. And you would put your paper, I'll demonstrate it for you. You put your paper, once you've decided where you're going to put your stamp, put your paper on the leather, then you take your stamp, I'll use the smaller one, and you cover the ink, the stone with ink. It has to be recovered. It is oil-based, unlike the painting, of course, which is water-based. And I will find where the bottom is. I can, if I'm doing it on a painting instead of just on a piece of paper, I can use this to make sure I have it exactly where I want it. And let me see. All right, I'll do it so it's going to be right side up for you. If you're
And what does the signature mean, this one in particular?
This is heart, mind, spirit. You press really hard, really, really hard, and go to right, and to left, and top, and to bottom, and corner, and to corner, and corner, and to corner. And then press hard, hard, hard again, so it hurts your fingers. Hold the paper down, lift it, and there is a lovely stamp.
Isn't that absolutely exquisite?
Isn't it? Now I have to paint a picture on there too.
Yes, you do. That is fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I'll have to clean that off when we take a little stop in our proceedings. Yeah, and then the paper.
The paper, yes.
Which is called washi. Yep. Now people call it rice paper. It's a misnomer. There is no rice in rice paper. And I have various papers. You can see they're different colors. They're just beautiful. Some are very see-through like these ones. Some are thicker. I don't have any thicker ones out at the moment. But this one, for example, is called, I believe, Kuratani. And
It's beautiful.
Oh, it is. It's a very expensive
Wow.
paper. Of course, this is a very small piece of it. I get
Wow.
large sheets, and then I can cut them down to whatever size I want. So the washi is made from the inner bark of 3 plants in Japan, and it is handmade. There are many paper-making villages in Japan, not as many as there used to be, but the paper itself is amazing. I want every piece I can get.
Oh my gosh.
And this table that I work at is actually full of map drawers that each one has various kinds of Japanese handmade paper in them.
Wow.
So I have a lot of choice when I pull out my paper.
What an absolutely fascinating craft. I have to ask you what these are. We didn't talk about those.
No, well, these are paperweights, and they are fossils, as you can probably see. I have a very good friend who's a photographer, Pete Herlihy, and he bought these for me because he wanted to be part of my art.
Oh, Roslyn.
And they're so beautiful that I truly enjoy using them.
Absolutely a phenomenal experience this morning. Very moving, actually. Before we end, I want to ask you, I know you have had some major recognition in Japan for your craft. Can you share with us what that was about?
Well, I've had recognition in Japan and in Canada and even in England. And the Japanese, I have entered, I guess about 12 Japanese calligraphy exhibits through Shodo Canada. Shodo means Japanese calligraphy. And I've won many first prizes.
I'm sure
for my
you have.
work. And in Canada, I am a member of Sumi-e Artists of Canada. In fact, I'm their membership chairperson. And I've won a first, which is called the Ruth Yamada Award, named after the first teacher at the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center. I've won that twice. And I've also, when I haven't won that, I've won an honorable mention for my work. And I've also shown in England for the Wildlife Artists of the Year exhibit that's run by the, I believe it's, David Shepherd Foundation. I don't know if his first name was David, which raises money for wildlife, preserving wildlife.
And you've also written a book, Roslyn.
Yes. This book, The Brush Dances, was partially funded by the Dufferin Arts Council in this area, and it took me 8 years to write the book the way I wanted it, and it is a teaching book.
Mm-hmm.
It can be purchased not only here in my studio, but at various places, or Maggiuli Art Supply, across the road, Beauclair. But in the next week or so, I'm supposed to go online and fill out a special form, and it will be available on a print-on-demand basis pretty much worldwide, which I'm very excited about.
And you are a member of the Society of Canadian Artists and the Federation of Canadian Artists.
That's
as well.
correct. Yes, I'm an elected member of both those organizations.
So thank you very much this morning for an incredible talk, and I am truly honored to be in your presence, Roslyn.
Well, thank you. You're embarrassing me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm incredibly excited to see the master at her craft, Roslyn Levin. So Roslyn, you're going to demonstrate for us a piece of your Sumi-e artwork. So please talk as maybe don't talk when you're doing it. I'm not sure.
Well, I can explain that I am making the ink, as I explained earlier. Then you dry off the ink stick to help prevent cracking. I've already wet this brush, but I'll re-wet it. I work with a very dry brush.
And is that what most artists do, or you're saying is that something particular that you want to do?
Not all artists work with a dry brush. Now I've just put ink on the brush. I can test it here and you'll see that it's quite black. I can gray down by just touching the water. Just touching the water, dry off, and you can see the change already in the ink. So I have, you can see a variety of grays on here, going from a dark gray to almost water. And I think my brush is a little dry, so I'm just going to touch the water again. Just touching the edge, dry it off. And I'm just going to demonstrate something simple. So first, I see it already. Pick up some more ink. A little nervous, but I'm okay. Now I'm resting my hand partially because my hands do shake. Okay, normally you would just stand with the brush straight up and down or on the side as I did doing this part.
Oh, I know what you're doing right away also. And what type of a brush are you using, Roslyn?
I'm using a horsehair brush. I'm going to give a little more detail to this kitty. And I want to show you, you can see here how where the ink touches the wet part of the paper, how it runs so beautifully. All right, I'm just going to give a little more of a hip. This piece, and give my cat, well, would you like this cat spotted or striped?
Spotted.
Spotted, all right. So there's one spot, it's already started. This is a very odd looking cat, but then again, we have to remember it was suggested by a very interesting woman. So there's a kitty.
Wow, that is incredible.
The camera can see that.
Wow. And his backbone is quite evident, isn't it?
Yes.
Beautiful, nice, strong cat
Yeah.
at rest. Now, how would you mount that then on
For display?
yes.
Yeah. Traditionally, what it would be done is it would be mounted on another piece of washi and then on a silk scroll. Okay, or what I originally learned was mount on another piece of washi and then frame it like a watercolor under glass. But at one point in my career where I got really tired of carrying very heavy glass covered paintings, and I had a couple of pieces in shows where, for reasons unbeknownst to me, the painting may have fallen or been knocked about and the glass broke. I decided I didn't want to use glass anymore, and I literally had a dream about what to do. So what I do is, I'll use this little bee as an example, is I have my husband make wood canvases using birch plywood, and you can buy birch plywood canvases or panels in most art supply stores, but I don't paint to size. So he just makes me the various sizes that I use, and then using totally acid-free technology, I adhere the painting to another piece of washi, and then I take both of them and I glue them to the wood canvas. I get rid of any excess paper that would be around the sides in a magical manner called a wood block covered in sandpaper. And then I use 2 coats of UV protective clear acrylic medium, which is the only part of this art form that is not non-toxic, that is toxic. Oh, that's a better way to say that. And if I've used color in my piece, as you see in a few pieces there is color, in some of them a lot, usually not, The color is watercolor, sometimes acrylic if I don't have the correct watercolor and I just happen to have the acrylic around. But the watercolor, I love my watercolor palette because it looks like a rainbow of mess and beauty both at the same time. It's very, in my view, very wabi-sabi, as you would say in Japanese.
And they are placed very elegantly according to the color wheel.
Yes, indeed.
Your prices are very reasonable, Roslyn, for the amount of experience and effort that you've put into your work. So if people are interested in purchasing your work, they can certainly find me through Remarque Art Consulting, or they can come and visit you at Dragonfly Gallery in Orangeville.
Yes, or they can look at my website,
your website.
www.artbyroslyn.on for Ontario.ca for Canada, and then contact either yourself or contact Dragonfly, depending on where they're located and how they heard about it. Because the person they heard about it through should get credit.
Right. So please remember that, folks, if you're interested in purchasing what is an incredible form of art. So thank you, Roslyn, for spending such an enjoyable moment with us this morning. And I certainly wish you more than the best, you know that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always delightful to talk with you, Joe.
Thank you so much.